generations to come.
And welcome to another edition of the TDN Writers Room podcast. It's May 2nd, Kentucky Derby week at 2:25 Eastern Time in the afternoon here on the East Coast. My name is Bill Finley. I'm a correspondent for the Thoroughbred Daily News, and I'm also the co-host of the Down the Stretch show on Sirius XM Radio with Dave Johnson.
I am Randy Moss with NBC Sports at 2:25 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday. I am ensconced in a very dismal-looking room in a production trailer behind the Churchill Downs Grandstand, where we are obviously preparing for our Friday and Saturday telecasts.
Randy, you should just move your head one way or the other, because it looks like there we go.
You like my... Yeah. You like my artwork?
I didn't know you were an artist. Well done. All right. I'm Zoe Cadman with First Racing, Santa Anita and XBTV. Tailgate is over. Doodle has his cone off, so I just wanted him to say hi. And now he's going to exit stage left. Let's get into it. I'm excited.
All right. Gang, it's Kentucky Derby week, and I thought the best way to go, let's go over the whole field from 1 to 20. I don't think we need to worry about the also eligibles, but last year you needed to worry about him because Rich Strike came in off that list to win. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to go down horse for horse, give us some thoughts, some handicapping thoughts. Do you like the horse? Do you don't like the horse? Etc. So let's go in post-position order and start off with Hit Show, second in the Wood Memorial. And I think the theme for Hit Show and anything else coming out of the Wood Memorial like Lord Miles, it's going to be the same theme that we've talked about on the show several times, is that the Wood Memorial was not a strong race. It has not been a strong race for years. And it's hard to take a horse out of that race, even though I thought he ran very well in there to finish second by a nose. Manny Franco will ride him back in the Kentucky Derby. He's 0 for 4 in the Derby. And he's got the one post. Now, I don't think the one post is nearly as big a disadvantage as it used to be before they got that 20-horse starting gate. So I'm not going to throw him out because he's the one, but I will throw him out because I just don't think he's good enough.
Yeah, I don't think the one hole is nearly the disadvantage that it used to be. And frankly, I thought that it wasn't as big a disadvantage in the past as some people were trying to make it out to be. And it doesn't necessarily bother me that the Wood Memorial has such a dismal record since Funnyside in 2003. What bothers me more than that is that this year's Wood Memorial looked like a very weak running with three horses, right on the wire together, just heads and noses apart. Hit Show, to my eye, was solidly the best of the three that hit the wire together, even though he finished second, beaten a nose by Lord Miles. The figure came up slow. Brad Cox continues to be high on Hit Show. He thinks Hit Show has got just about as good of a chance, for example, as Angel of Empire. Also in his barn, who was a runaway winner of the Arkansas Derby. But I can't see it. I respect the horse. I respect Brad, but based on what I see on paper, he's a 40-1 shot, and deservedly so.
And that's like trying to pick your favorite child. He's not going to pick one over the other. He's playing trainer talk there, Randy. He's not going to say this one's better than that one. That's not going to happen. The one hole, 8 for 93. As far as records go back, the last horse to win out of the one hole was Ferdinand in 1986. I'm not opposed to the one hole. It's the shortest way around. Is Hit Show good enough? Probably not. He's been a little bit keen in his works there at Churchill Downs, which from the one hole has me a little bit guarded. He's going to have to watch himself going into the first turn, and Manny Franco's going to have to try and work out a trip for Hit Show.
Number 2 is Verifying, also from the Brad Cox barn. If you like Tappet Trice, which I do, he will be my pick when we get to him. You can't dislike Verifying. He ran a very good race against him last time out, losing by a neck. I think Tappet Trice is more likely to improve off that race than Verifying in the Bluegrass. But again, he ran second, beaten only a neck by the horse that I think is going to win the Kentucky Derby. So I absolutely have to be on board with this horse. And the thing about Brad Cox that I like, and go back to Hit Show, he has improved Beyer numbers every single race. Verifying not quite the same pattern, but I think Brad Cox is doing an excellent job and continues to do an excellent job of getting these horses through the preps and getting them to peak when they come in for the big day. So he won't be on top of my tickets, but I certainly respect him. Tyler Gaffalione will ride. He's 0 for 5 in the Derby. Best finish for Tyler, even though he's the top rider at Churchill Downs now, was 7th in 2019 with War of Will. So that is my take on Verifying.
Yeah. So you want to alternate here? I took a hit show first. Why don't you take Verifying first?
I like Verifying. The 2 positions, 7 for 93. The last horse to win from it was the Great Affirmed back in 1997. This is a horse who's been on my radar since Saratoga last year, watching him work. He's a good workhorse. His breeze over the track was very good, 59-2. Didn't really look like he was doing anything, so that's a big plus for me. I think he's got the right running style, and I don't think the distance being by Justify out of a repent mare, that's not the best thing, but Justify is definitely going to help him get the 1.25 miles. And you know how there's sometimes just some horses that stick with you and you can't think why? Verifying is one of them. So he's definitely going on my ticket.
Yeah, I think he is definitely, in my opinion, a top 4 horse in the Kentucky Derby. I didn't necessarily like his post position draw for his running style. He was going to have to be, used a little bit anyway because he's a forwardly placed horse to begin with. But I think he's now going to have to be used a little bit more than he was originally going to be from post position number 2 by Tyler Gaffalione. I don't think they necessarily want to be on the early lead, though. So if they can just get a good position in the run to the first turn and then find a spot to flip out and stalk a little bit off the rail, I think that's what they're looking for. Loved his bounce back race in the Bluegrass, and I think he is definitely an A-list contender. And I've come around to thinking that I think I like Verifying better than any of Cox's 4 horses that he has in the Derby.
Interesting. That means you like him better than Angel of Empire. Number 3 is Two Phils. He's the most, to me, puzzling or perplexing horse in the race. We talked about it before. He runs this terrific race in the Jeff Ruby Stakes, which is what I'm insisting on calling it. Gets the 101 Beyer, the best figure of any Beyer figure of anybody in the field. But you have to, again, answer this question. Was it the synthetic? Because he was not nearly as good on the dirt before. He was okay, but he got beat by Angel of Empire, got beat by Instant Coffee, the Risen Star, and the LeCompte. Or is he just a horse that is came into his own in that race? I tend to think it's more the latter in there. First of all, on the Thoroughgraph sheets, they give you figures on the sires so far as how they do on synthetic versus dirt. He's by Hard Spun. The offspring of Hard Spun win 15% of the time on synthetic and 16% of the time on dirt. So there's no difference there. So there's nothing in his pedigree that says he shouldn't like the dirt. And, Larry Ravelli also is an interesting character in this race. He is really good. He's over his career won 25%. That's Chad Brown, Bob Baffert land to have won 25%, but hasn't had a lot of chances with top flight horses. But he has won 11 graded stakes races. I think he's a very live horse. I think he can actually win this race. He's not my pick, but I'm not going to label him just a synthetic freak. I think this horse is for real.
Yeah, there's a simple question that you have to answer when you're handicapping Two Phils to decide if you want to use him in the Derby or not. And that is simply how much of his last start was synthetic and how much of it could be classified as standard 3-year-old improvement. 3 races back in the LeCompte, he had a beautiful trip, made the lead at the 8th pole, and then Instant Coffee blew him away in the final furlong. In his last race, he had a really good trip, made a super move turning for home. And then Angel of Empire and Sun Thunder outfinished him in the final furlong. And Sun Thunder is going to be 60-70-1 in the Kentucky Derby on Saturday. Then he steps into the Jeff Ruby and runs a much improved race. Logically, that would tell you that it had to do with the change of surface more than anything else. But we don't know. It's a guessing game. Larry Ravelli doesn't know. Jareth Loveberry doesn't know. It's a total guess as to how much of it had to do with synthetic. My experience, most cases like this, it's a function of the switch to the synthetic surface. So that's why I'm not using Two Phils, but would I be shocked if he wins the Kentucky Derby? No.
I'm right with you there. I'm rooting for Larry Ravelli. I rode for him at Hawthorne. This horse comes in from Hawthorne. They're really flying the flag, comes in with a bullet work at Hawthorne. Now, the track at Hawthorne right now is very glib. I would have liked to have a work over Churchill. He's run over Churchill and he's run well, but I don't think he's kind of gotten over a deep track this year. The Fairgrounds isn't a terribly deep track. I think he skipped across the top of the ground at Turfway Park over the synthetic there. And he's a big, heavy horse. He's super easy to train. He does everything you want, but he's not going to do anything more than you ask him. So, I mean, that 59 work was good, but I'm not sure it really got to the bottom of him. And is he good enough over the main track at Churchill? I don't know. I am rooting for Larry, but I'm not going to use two fills on my ticket. Oh, 5 for 93, that post position, by the way. Epicenter was second out of it last year, and Real Quiet was the last one to win in 98.
Number 4 is Confidence Game. And after the race, Keith Desarmo is either going to look like a genius, a little bit of a dummy, to be practical about this. Everything he's done with his horses is unorthodox. The 10-week layoff after he won the Rebel, the 1 mile workout. I see today on Tuesday, the horse didn't even go to the track. What do you make of all that? I'm not going to throw him out because of any of those things. I think Keith Desarmo knows what he's doing. And if he thinks this is the right way to get the horse for his best race, I have faith in him. I'm going to throw him out because I don't think he's good enough. He got clobbered in the LeCompte by Instant Coffee and two fills and had never really run any kind of decent number for that. Then came into the Rebel. It was a sloppy track. Maybe he just loved the mud that day. I got to see more from him than just that one good race in the Rebel, because prior to that, he really was not a top flight Kentucky Derby candidate. But boy, if he wins this, we'll see everybody coming in off 10 and 11 week layoffs next year. So we'll see.
Have you met Keith Desarmo? I mean, he goes by the beat of his own drum, and it beats like wherever it feels like it. Keith just does whatever he feels is right by the horse. The 10 weeks doesn't bother me. The mile work out of the gate, I like for him because that was his race. According to Keith, he had a few days off. If you gallop for Keith in the morning, you got the best job on the backside because you get 2 or 3 days off a week. He doesn't train his horses every day. He believes in having them fit, and that's what's happened with Confidence coming in. His work over the track pricked my ears. I haven't seen a horse work that well over the Churchill Downs surface in a very, very long time. And if you don't believe me, we're going to show it just a little bit later on for the XBTV work of the week. I like Confidence Game. Off of that, if you think 10 weeks between starts is a problem, think back to 10 weeks ago, Bill, when you didn't like Tapit Treese, and he made a huge jump forward in the bluegrass. If Confidence Game can make that kind of jump forward, perhaps he's the horse.
Look, I'm a big fan of Keith Desarmo. I think he's one of, if not the most underrated trainer in America, given the results that he gets with horses that, as we've talked about in the past, that are not exactly, sales toppers over the years. And I think this horse looks like $1 million right now. I mean, he looks so good on the racetrack. And as Zoe pointed out, he's, when we've seen him train, he's trained pretty well. I have 2 major problems, though, with Confidence Game. First of all, I don't think he's good enough. The Rebel has come up, even though the Fig was okay, it was on a sloppy track. And the form of the Rebel hasn't really held up. Red Route 1, who finished second behind Confidence Game, came back, did not run very well in the Arkansas Derby. It looks like he's talent limited. With Reincarnate and his trip in the Rebel finishing third, he looked like easily the best horse in the race. And given everything that happened to him, he was only beaten a 2.5 lengths by Confidence Game. So I don't like the Rebel, period. Second problem with it. If Keith Desarmo had come out after the Rebel and he had said, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I think this is best for the horse. I'm going to give this horse 10 weeks off, and I'm going to point for the Kentucky Derby, and I don't care about the 10-week layoff. This is my plan. I'm going to march to the beat of my own drum. That's what I'm going to do. No, that's not what happened, right? He comes out of the Rebel Stakes, and Keith is a straight shooting guy, but he's got owners, and he's got the media to deal with. And he says, okay, the horse, the Rebel knocked him for a loop and really took a lot more out of him than I thought. That was the official line. We may make the Arkansas Derby, we may not. But if we don't make the Arkansas Derby, there's the Bluegrass. So he misses the Arkansas Derby. Then the Bluegrass comes up. And he said, well, we're not going to make the Bluegrass. We'll go for the Lexington. Okay. Then the Lexington comes up. Well, we're not going to run in the Lexington. We're going to train him up to the Kentucky Derby. I promise you, there's something going on here more than just the horse was knocked for a loop coming out of the Rebel. They're dealing with some stuff with Confidence Game. I don't know for a fact, but you can just read between the lines. Keith is not going to run a horse that's not sound, but I think his training has been compromised between the Rebel and now, to the point that, given the Rebel stakes and what I feel about that, put that on top of it, and I can't like Confidence Game no matter how good he looks right now.
All right. Move on now to Tapit Trice, number 5, who's the second choice in the morning line. Todd Pletcher has the 2 favorites in the morning line. People have been listening to the show the last couple of weeks know that this is my pick. We're going to have Andy Beyer on a little bit later as the Green Group Guest of the Week. And what he said, that he looks for a horse that is going to peak in the Derby, that is improving, getting better. And I completely concur with that. It's funny. Zoe reminds me, I didn't like his Tampa Bay Derby one bit. Now, all the 10 weeks later, 8 weeks later, whatever it is, I'm picking the horse because he was a much different horse in the Bluegrass. And, you see the big price tag, the $1.3 million, you see by Tapit, Todd Pletcher, trainer, despite the 2 for 62, I'm not ever going to throw out a Todd Pletcher horse in the Derby because of that. I just think it's more circumstances than anything else. I think this horse has run one of the best races of anybody in the field, and he's the one I'm most confident in that is going to run even better in the Derby. I'm a little bit worried about the pace. We haven't talked about that yet. I don't think it's going to be particularly fast. He is going to be back 16th, 15th, 14th early on. Randy, I know you have some reservations about kind of his lack of nimbleness, and he's not really a quick horse, and we'll hear more about that. But I'm on Tapit Trice to win Kentucky Derby.
Okay. Hey, look, I think Tapit Trice and another horse that I'll talk about later that Zoe wants to take a drink to are the 2 best horses in the Kentucky Derby. I think, and I'll just say Derno Sotogake. Okay. Go ahead and take a sip there, Zoe. There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. It's our new drinking game. Every time I mention Derno Sotogake, Zoe takes a sip of whatever it is in her red cup there. I hope it's something really good and not water. Look, Tapit Trice's Bluegrass and Dermo Sotogake's UAE Derby, my opinion, were the 2 best prep races of all. Tapit Trice, you watch him come, buzz around here in the mornings at Churchill Downs. He looks sensational. He looks so good, right? He's training great. He's got all the talent in the world. But we know from the Bluegrass and from watching him in all his other races, first of all, he doesn't break from the gate. It's a little better in the Bluegrass, but he still breaks a little slowly. With the pace, expected kind of slowish pace in the Derby, that doesn't help him. We saw in the Bluegrass going into the first turn, he reacted very badly when horses started to crowd him from the outside. It was as if he felt he was going to be pushed into the rail and got a little claustrophobic. It was either that or dirt hitting him. And either one is not necessarily good when you've drawn a sort of an inside post in a 20-horse Kentucky Derby field. He's not the kind of horse, I think, who can be in the middle of the pack and can get stopped in traffic and reboot and quickly regain his best stride. So I think the only alternative to Tapit Trice is that somehow they're going to have to work their way to the outside, and then they're going to have to hope they don't get caught 6 wide. Because you got 20 horses in the Kentucky Derby without a fast pace, and they're going to be kind of bunched up. So I think all that works against Tapit Trice. I want to get down on him right now in the Belmont Stakes. But even though I think he's the best horse or one of the 2 best horses in the Kentucky Derby, I just don't see it setting up well for him. Zoe, what do you think?
Everything you said and more. He does have a good post, though. I will say that much. 10 for 93. The last winner was Always Dreaming in 2017. Audible was 3rd out of that post. So he has the winningest post in Kentucky Derby history, which is a big plus. I'm just not getting the right vibe for him. Seeing him on the track at Churchill Downs, and I even spoke to Mike Welch about it, terrific. I mean, a big thumbs up from him. It just depends if Luis Saez can work out a trip for him where he doesn't get stopped.
Randy, one thing I totally agree with you. If he doesn't win the Derby, he's going to finish fifth. Then he's going to be a cinch in the Belmont. I mean, because, that's so much of Pletcher's MO. Okay, speaking of Pletcher, go on now to number 6, King's Barnes. And I'll repeat what I said last week. This is my non-50-1 shot that I don't like one bit. And the Louisiana Derby, he just stole the race. The fractions are 24-3, 49-3, 114-3. Now, honestly, I don't think the pace is going to be particularly fast in the Derby. And he might go right to the lead again, but he's not going to get to the lead in 49-3. Kind of a completely different trip. And, you take out the Louisiana Derby before that, 85 Beyer winning a Tampa Bay Downs allowance race. Flavien Prat wisely, I think, went to Angel of Empire. But and interestingly, he's the only undefeated horse in the race since 1915. 34 undefeated horses have run in the Derby. 9 have won, the latest being Justify, but this is no Justify. I see him being a pace factor early and fading to finish mid-pack, something like that.
I mean, he's 3 for 3. I did actually like his race in the Louisiana Derby. I don't think it was a particularly strong race, although a lot of people are liking Disarm of his recent works going into the Kentucky Derby. I will say one thing. Pratt, after he got off him, said he gave him a really, really good feel. Like, the final time wasn't the fastest, but he did say he had a lot of horse. I know he's riding Angel of Empire, but that is a plus for me for King's Barnes. Am I going to use him? I'm not going to use him, but it wouldn't surprise me to see him run a little bit better than most people will give him credit for.
King's Barnes is a classic example of the challenge of handicapping the modern day Kentucky Derby when horses have so little experience as a whole. This horse has only run 3 times. If it was 30 years ago, we would have seen King's Barnes in multiple graded stakes. We would know how good King's Barnes is when he doesn't have the benefit of a soft early pace. And he doesn't have a race gifted to him like he had in the Louisiana Derby. We would just know a lot more. We'd have a lot more evidence about King's Barnes. Now we're just left to guess, right? It's just a guessing game. Todd Pletcher doesn't know. Jose Ortiz, Flavien Prat, who rode him last time, doesn't know how capable this horse is going to be in the Kentucky Derby with a different kind of trip. He may stalk the pace in the Derby and hit the top of the stretch and draw away. But all we have to go on is what we've seen. And he got such a soft trip in the Louisiana Derby that he is the kind of horse that is a classic, bet against type horse if he's not going to get the same trip Saturday. And he's not. But you don't know. It's really challenging.
Number 7 is Reincarnate, trained by Tim Yakteen, started the year in the Bob Baffert stable. And remember when Baffert seemed to have every single horse there was in California? He had all 4 starters in the Robert Lewis. This is the only survivor of that. So Tim Yakteen has taken over. It's not officially Bob Baffert, but the Baffert stable has not had a strong performance with the horses coming out of the Baffert stable. You remember back when Arabian Night was all the rage, and we haven't seen him in quite some time. Randy, I think you and I both really liked what we saw from him in the Rebel, where he had a lot of trouble. He closed well, finished 3rd. Then he comes into the Arkansas Derby, and I think that the comment line in the form sums it up perfectly. Empty. He was empty. He just didn't have it. He was right there in striking position, and he just didn't have it. It was not a good race. It's not a good race to come into the Kentucky Derby off of. Don't like him.
Yeah, his last 3 races, it's like he's 3 different horses. He runs in the Sham. He goes 45 and change. He goes 109 and change on the front end, sets the pace, dogged determination, refuses to lose, comes back in the Rebel, breaks poorly from way back in the pack, closes nicely to finish 2nd. And then he gets a stalking trip in the Arkansas Derby and comes up empty. Off his last workout and off his sham stakes earlier and with John Velasquez in the saddle, I'm expecting Reincarnate to show a lot of speed. Wouldn't be surprised at all if Johnny tries to put him on the early lead, given the relative lack of pace. I think he'll be right up there. But off of his Arkansas Derby, I agree with Bill. I don't like him at all.
Yeah, and his last work was here on Friday at Santa Anita. Tim sending out a horse in front, the Big Wham. That was worked in 49 and change, but interestingly enough, Reincarnate hooked up with a Baffert runner and went to the wire with him in 46 and 2, surpassing his actual workmate, the Big Wham. So he went head and head with Mr. Fisk, who's trained by Baffert. Well, I mean, you could say he's trained by Tim because he ran in the San Felipe last time out. So it was a very good, sharp work. So I agree with Randy in the fact that he is going to be part of the early pace. And I will say one thing. He may be a little one-paced, I think, but he can keep it going. He's a big horse. He stands over a lot of ground, and it wouldn't surprise me to see him in the hunt at the top of the lane. Is he good enough to win? I don't know, but I think he'll be around at the quarter pole.
Yep. One more thing to add about Reincarnate. If there's always a point counterpoint on all these, and none of us really like Reincarnate that much. But John Velazquez does say that in his opinion, his effort in the Arkansas Derby was compromised by the weather in Southern California and the fact that he didn't, according to Velazquez, his training pattern, as were all the horses out there at that time, was interrupted prior to the Arkansas Derby. He thinks that's why he came up short. I asked Yaktine about that. Tim said, I don't really like to make excuses or anything. I said, well, could it be a plausible explanation? And he said, yeah, it's possible that could be the explanation. So just keep that in mind.
Number 8 is Mage. And when we were dissecting the Florida Derby afterwards, both Randy and Zoe were just raving about this horse, and for good reason. He ran a heck of a race in the Florida Derby. He got off poorly, wound up 12th in the field early, dead last, closed well, ran by Forte. There's going to be a little debate later on in the show about how you pronounce that horse. He's Forte to me, but stay tuned. You'll understand what I'm saying about that. He ran right by Forte and looked like he was going to win the race, and Forte had another gear and came and got him. He's dangerous. There's no doubt about it. He is also, like Kingsbarn, so lightly raced, 3 lifetime starts, began his career on January 28th. And I think, Randy, maybe you'd say the same thing, kind of guessing a little bit about him. Is he as – I think you can't make the case that he's better than Forte because he's lost to him 2 in a row. But this is a dangerous horse. He's a good horse. Looks like he's getting better. And his Florida Derby was really good.
I'm not using him. He's just making his 4th start. I think he's lacking a little bit of experience in here. His Florida Derby was excellent. I will give you that much. I'm not sold on his ability to go 1.25 miles. Puka, we don't know how good the dam was, Puka. She won by, 20 in her debut. She was a very, very good filly indeed, and she's by Big Brown, who won the Derby. So maybe I'm going to be eating my words, but I can't talk you off him, but I'm not going to go with Mage in the Kentucky Derby.
His Florida Derby, I thought, was an outstanding effort until he got to the 8th pole. The last furlong for Mage in the Florida Derby was something like 13 and 3. It was very weak. A very weak closing effort. You can maybe make the case, as some people are, that Luis Saez moved too soon, and that's why the horse came up empty. But Saez is a regular at Gulfstream Park. Races are every day won at Gulfstream on the dirt because of the short stretch by riders that make moves a little bit earlier than you would on a normal racing surface. So I think Saez, when he flew by Forte at the 5/16 pole, he was confident that he was going to win. I didn't like the way the horse finished up in that race. So at 1.25 miles, it gives me a little bit of a cause for concern. I also don't like the fact that in 3 races, he's broken poorly 3 times. And if that happens in the Kentucky Derby, who knows if it's going to or not. But if it happens in the Derby, then it's not good.
The TDN Writers' Room is brought to you by Keeneland, home of the world's yearling sale. The energy, magic, and momentum of the Keeneland September yearling sale returns September the 11th through the 23rd. Learn more at theworldsyearlingsale.com. We'll be right back after this message from Keeneland.
If this place could talk, it would roar. It would say, this is racing. This beating heart in the heart of horse country. steady and strong beneath the roar, reminding us why. For the love of the horse, for generations to come.
Maximum Security proves he's the real deal with a gate-to-wire win in the Florida Derby.
Champion 3-year-old.
Maximum Security has won the TVG.com Haskell Invitational.
11 triple-digit buyers.
Maximum Security, he smoked them in the Cigar Mile.
Grade 1 winning 4-year-old.
Maximum Security takes them all the way in the TVG Pacific Classic.
Secure your mare's future. Maximum Security.
The TDN Writers' Room is brought to you by Coolmore. In winning the Grade 2 Santa Maria Stakes on Sunday, Adair Manor becomes the latest of Uncle Mo's impressive winners in 2023. The 4-year-old filly set the pace and went on to win easily by 4 3/4 lengths. Uncle Mo's 8 stakes winners and 4 graded stakes winners are the second best among all North American stallions this year. They are led by Grade 1 winner Amore, or Amore. Uncle Mo was the sire of 9 7-figure 2-year-olds at the recently concluded OBS April sale, including not 1, but 2 at $675,000.
All right, let's pick things up now with the 9-horse Skinner, trained by John Sheriffs. Some interesting jockey situations here. The Victor Espinosa has won 3 Kentucky Derbies, yet they took him off to ride Juan Hernandez, who's not only never ridden in the Kentucky Derby, he's never ridden in his entire career at Churchill Downs. But I have no problem with the jockey switch. Hernandez is just a magician, and the way that he's been going out at Santa Anita, I can really see why they wanted him aboard this horse. He's kind of a little bit of a wise guy horse. I don't think he's going to be a huge price. I mean, he's not going to be 30 to 1, one of those kind of horses, but maybe in the 15, 18 to 1. I'm going to use him on my tickets for a couple reasons. First of all, I have a lot of respect for John Sheriffs and the way he brings horses around. You know, he's patient, he takes his time. And here's another horse that looks like he's progressing. He couldn't get out of his own way last year, and then Sheriffs brought him back, and he won that maiden race in February. Good race in the San Felipe, good race in the Santa Anita Derby. Can he step up and move up another 3 or 4 lengths is probably what it's going to take. Another 3 or 4 Beyer points, probably what it's going to take. But I just see this as another horse that's got the potential to do that. He was 3rd in the Santa Anita Derby. Giacomo, who lit up the tote board for Sheriffs way back when, was 4th in the Santa Anita Derby. Skinner was 3rd in the San Felipe, and Giacomo was 2nd in San Felipe. So you have the angle of John Sheriff's horses coming up a little bit short in the preps at Santa Anita. And not that I like Giacomo one bit that day, but he came through and won. So it just goes to show you what Sheriffs can do.
Look, if I think Skinner's in with a nice shot, I really do, and I love the fact that he drew into the race because he deserves to be in the Kentucky Derby field. Rating the prep races, I've already told you that I thought Dermis Sotogake 1, Tapit Trice 2, in terms of how fast they ran and how impressive they were. I would actually, just off the preps, I would put Skinner 3 and verifying 4. He was wide in the Santa Anita Derby, and yet still was, right there. You could make the case on ground loss alone that he was maybe the best horse in the Santa Anita Derby. I like the jockey change because Victor Espinosa, as with all the success he's had, was making no effort at all to save any kind of ground on Skinner at any point of any of the races that he rode in. Now, I have some of the same concerns about Skinner that I have with Tapit Trice. Is he the kind of horse that can avoid being 6 or 7 wide and maneuver his way through traffic and maybe have to wait every now and then regain his stride and be the kind of stop and go handy type horse that it often takes to come from behind and win the Derby? That's my primary concern about Skinner, and that's why I'm not using him in this race in my time.
I think he's this year's Giacomo. I really do. Distance not going to be a problem. I don't know who actually came to the final decision to take off Victor Espinosa, who was 5 wide on both turns last time out. I don't know if it was Lee Searing or if it was trainer John Sheriffs. I know John wasn't overly pleased with the ride he got from him last time. Victor just 2 wins from 35 mounts this year. JJ Hernandez, he's won 60 races this year and leading rider by double the amount of his nearest pursuer, who was Flavian Pratt. So I'm fine with the rider change there on Skinner. He's by Carlin. He's out of Winding Way. I mean, he's bred to run 1.5 miles, got a decent post position, 4 for 89. I can't talk you off of Skinner moving forward. And let's just not forget, Sheriff's was 4th with Gormley just a few years ago. I think we all forgot about that. I didn't think he had any shot. Sheriff's still kicking himself for training that horse the morning of the race because he was so worried he wouldn't be able to get the tack on him later because he was a little punk. He thinks he kind of took the vim and vigor out of him and he ran 4th. So he said he's definitely not going to train him the morning of the race this year, Skinner, for sure. So I can't talk you off of Skinner if you like him. I really can't.
Number 10 is Practical Move from breeder Chad Brown. How about that? That's been one of the stories. He has earned the right to be called the best horse on the West Coast. Wins the Los Al Futurity, wins the San Felipe, wins the Santa Anita Derby. Ramon Vasquez aboard both times. He's ridden once in the Derby in 2015, finished 13th, Mr. Z. But here's my problem with this horse. In his last 2 starts, he could not have had better trips. They were almost identical. I mean, Ramon Vasquez has done a tremendous job on this horse. He saved ground on both turns in both races, got through on the inside, and was able to prevail. So, should I like a horse coming into the Kentucky Derby off perfect trips, whereas it's almost impossible to get a perfect trip unless you're Sonny Leone on Rich Strike in the Kentucky Derby. So, I wouldn't be at all shocked if this horse won, but just from a handicapping standpoint, I can't, really jump on the bandwagon of a horse who's, especially as when the Santa Anita Derby was, came after just, again, a brilliant ride and a great trip. So that's my knock on him.
I like him. By Practical Joke out of the Fleet Alex Mare. I think maybe he's hit the lead a little bit too soon in each of his starts and perhaps idles a little bit. He's going to have to work out a good trip under Ramon Vasquez, who's only ridden in the Kentucky Derby once, I believe. He might have finished 12th or 13th for Mr. Z for D. Wayne Lucas. The post is 9 for 86. Giacomo, actually, funnily enough, was the last horse to win from that post position. He's tactical. Just take a look at him. He's a big horse who stands over an awful lot of ground. The argy-bargy of the Derby is not going to do him any problems at all. And he acquiesces very nicely. You can put him just about anywhere in the race. So I like Practical Move in here for Tim Yak team.
Maybe famous last words from me, but, Bill, I'm with you. Zoe will have the glory all by herself. Practical Move wins the Kentucky Derby. And not because I don't think he's a good horse, not because I'd be shocked if he wins, but just like you said, Bill, this is the kind of horse that as a handicapper, I like to try to take a stand against, because it's not just the Santa Anita Derby, the San Felipe. Even the Los Al Futurity, he had an inside trip and got through along the rail all the way around. And that's not going to happen, almost certainly not going to happen in the Kentucky Derby. So one other thing to mention about the California horses that John Sheriff's mentioned to me this morning on the backside that I thought was kind of interesting, that you just may want to, put in your pipe or whatever, just think about it. Sheriff said he thinks that the California horses in general running at Churchill Downs this weekend are going to love the surface, because he describes the Santa Anita's surface, and Zoe would know more about this than me, as being a very heavy kind of surface right now. A little deep, but mainly heavy, as compared to Churchill Downs, which is a very light sort of surface. And he believes that the horses that have been at Santa Anita, it's almost going to be like a human training with ankle weights or something. You take the ankle weights off, or maybe running in army boots and now they're running in tennis shoes. He thinks they're going to really have a spring in their step when they hit the Churchill Downs racing surface.
They'll be fit. They will be fit, for sure.
Number 11 is Disarm. The story here is trainer Steve Asmussen, very unlucky not to win the Derby last year. He is, to me, the best trainer in the sport who has never won the Kentucky Derby. He's 0 for 24. It's going to be 0 for 25 on Saturday. This horse snuck in. He handled this very well. He didn't have enough points. He ran him in the Lexington. He got third in the Lexington, which got him into the race. But I mean, the Lexington is a C caliber prep. It's not nearly as strong as any of the other preps. The last ones, the Arkansas Derby, Bluegrass, all those kind of races. I can't. I know people say he's training well, but Horse was a mediocre third in the Lexington. I can't see having any chance in the Kentucky Derby.
He's had his training sort of interrupted this year. It hasn't gone as smoothly as Asmussen would have liked. He was behind schedule when he ran him at Oaklawn Park in an allowance race on February the 19th, which he really ran him in only because he thought he was a Derby horse. And in order to get points, he had to run in the Louisiana Derby, he felt. And to make the Louisiana Derby, he had to run in the allowance race first. So he didn't think he was fit for that. He didn't think he was completely fit for the Louisiana Derby. And if he were to get the points to get in, it would be a miracle. Well, he did. And he said he expected a huge step upward in the Kentucky Derby. But when he ran in the Lexington, I didn't really see a huge step forward. Maybe he wasn't completely cranked up for that race. And yes, he was behind slow fractions. I think he's a nice horse. I wouldn't be surprised to see him finish fourth and be part of the Superfecta and show improvement at 1.25 miles. But he's going to have so much improvement to actually win the Kentucky Derby, in my opinion, that it's hard.
Looks like a good doer. He's a big framed horse, or at least he looks like a big framed horse from the TV I've seen of him. Haven't actually seen him in person, so maybe fitness is an issue. His work was good, but I mean, I might look good going 1/2 and 49 as well. So I don't know about this arm. He does have Rosario in his corner. He's got Asmussen in his corner, and he can't wait to win the Derby. That post position, 2 for 82, the last one winning from it was Winning Colors in 1988.
Number 12 is Jace's Road. Congratulations to our sponsor, West Point Thoroughbreds, for getting another horse into the Kentucky Derby. But I find it impossible to think this horse will even finish in the top 10 in the field. He stalked that very slow pace set by King's Barnes in the Louisiana Derby, and then from there just faded in the stretch to get beat 6 1/4 lengths. Yeah, and I'd love to own him. He's made $238,000, and he's a proven stakes horse. He won the Gun Runner Stakes and won that wire to wire, which makes me think maybe he'll be part of the early pace. But again, just to me, this is one is clearly not good enough.
I'm in agreement with you for Brad Cox. He is keeping someone else out though. And good luck to West Point Thoroughbreds, because honestly, 19,671 foals of 2020, I believe it is. The fact that you're even in the Derby, you've already won as far as I'm concerned. You got 20 horses from a foal crop of over 19,000. Congrats to everyone who's even in the race. So I can't knock him for getting here. I really, really can't. It takes an awful lot to get even one horse to the races.
Look, when you go back and you watch this Louisiana Derby, he actually had a neck in front of King's Barnes when they passed the wire for the first time. But because King's Barnes had inside position on him, he used the rail around the first turn to get clear from Jace's Road. But if Jace's Road couldn't beat King's Barnes to the lead in 49 and change in the Louisiana Derby, even though I think they're going to try to go with him early on Saturday, I just don't think he's fast enough. I expect to see him maybe 4th or 5th in the early running, and then back up and, like Bill said, finish in the back half of the field.
Number 13 is Sun Thunder. I'm a big Kenny McPeek fan. This wouldn't be the first time he shocked the world with a big long shot, but boy, blinkers on, maybe that'll help because he needs a lot of help. Again, a horse with no early speed, 4th beaten a long way in the Bluegrass, 5th beaten a long way in the Louisiana Derby. I will say this much, though, for Kenny McPeek. He deserves credit because one of the storylines this year was horses not getting into the Derby field because he didn't run enough. And Sun Thunder didn't really do anything special all year, but he ran in 4 Derby preps. And he just sort of nickeled and dimed his way into the field. So, and McPeek, McPeek is not afraid to run his horses. But as much respect as I have for Kenny, just like Jace's Road, so far as ability, does he have the ability to beat these other 19 horses? There's nothing in his past performances or his prior races that would suggest that he does.
Yeah, I mean, look, Jace's Road is trained by Brad Cox, who's had a fabulous year. Sun Thunder, I share your opinion about Kenny McPeek, but in the end, it's the horse. And I just don't think Sun Thunder's fast enough. He's going to have to improve too much to even be a part of the superfecta. Maybe if it was going to be a torrid early pace in here, you could maybe make a case for him clunking up and being part of the superfecta. But I think Sun Thunder's going to be a 50, 60 to 1 shot that's going to be in the back half of the field when it's all said and done.
Hopefully the blinkers on helps him. He looks like he's added a little bit of spark. His recent work in 47-4 was better than we've seen from Sun Thunder. 50 to 1 for a reason. That post position, 5 for 76, the last horse to win from there, was Nyquist in 2016.
Number 14 is Angel of Empire from the Brad Cox barn. To me, on paper, he looks like an obvious threat in here. Wouldn't be the least bit surprised to see him win. Again, shows that Brad Cox pattern of just getting better every single race. But I want to throw to Randy, because Randy, earlier, I think you said of the Cox horses, you put him as the third best behind Verifying and Hit Show. I was a little surprised to hear that. So obviously you're not a huge fan of this horse. Why?
I put him at second best, Verifying and then Angel of Empire and then Hit Show. Brad actually said that he thought Hit Show and Angel of Empire were really comparable in terms of their chances to win. Look, visually impressive in the Arkansas Derby. I thought he was more visually impressive than Forte was winning the Florida Derby. I think 1.25 miles is going to be right in his wheelhouse. I think he's got a chance to win. I would be surprised if he won. I think he's in as among the top 5 or 6 contenders in the race. I happen to prefer Verifying a little more just because of the way I think the Kentucky Derby is going to be run and the relatively, I want to say modest pace, but maybe an average pace scenario as opposed to a fast pace scenario. So while I do like Verifying a little better than Angel of Empire, doesn't mean that I don't like Angel of Empire and don't think he has a chance. Zoe?
I like him. I'll take a good price on him with Flavian Pratt. His sire was 4th in the Kentucky Derby, and he had all kinds of issues leading up to the race and still managed to be 4th. Interestingly enough, they worked this horse in blinkers in the morning to get him into the bridle, and his last work was terrific. He always works in blinkers, and he doesn't run in blinkers. Brad Cox simply saying he doesn't need them in the afternoon. He's a PA bred. You'll like that one, Randy, looking to become the 3rd PA bred to win the Derby since Little E.T. and Smarty Jones. So rooting for Angel of Empire and definitely using him on my ticket. I thought his Arkansas Derby was sensational, and obviously Pratt thought the same.
The reason he works in blinkers and doesn't run in blinkers is his extreme laid-back personality. Cox said that in the Arkansas Derby paddock, where horses can sometimes get a little discombobulated because they go from the inside to the infield, and the infield can kind of make horses at Oaklawn with the fans right there just a little bit out of sorts. He said Angel of Empire was practically asleep in the paddock at Oaklawn. He calls him bomb-proof. And he said if there's one big advantage that this horse has in Kentucky with all the commotion on Kentucky Derby Day, it's that it's not going to bother Angel of Empire whatsoever. The blinkers just get him a little bit more keyed up for his training, which Brad thinks he needs.
Number 15, your 3 to 1 morning line favorite, Forte, Todd Pletcher, Irad Ortiz Jr. Hard to fault a horse that was a 2-year-old champion and is 2 for 2 this year, winning the Fountain of Youth and the Florida Derby. But you know what? It's not just me. It doesn't seem like anybody likes this horse. I don't, you go online, you read various things, you look on Twitter, nobody's picking him. And I'm going to do the same. I'm going to just throw him out. And some of these things I'll repeat when we talk to Andy Beyer later, but he's on the speed figures. He's really not a standout. He's in the same class as 6 or 7 other horses. And when he runs 100 in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile and a 2.5 on the Thoroughgraph sheets that day, he should be running as a 3-year-old now faster than that. You want to see horses at 3 are supposed to be faster than they were at 2. He is not. You could say he's actually stepped down a little bit in the opposite direction. Got a 95 in the Florida Derby, 5 points less than his Breeders' Cup Juvenile. It was an odd race. I mean, you got to give him some credit for winning because at the quarter pole, it didn't look like he had a chance. And he showed a lot of class that day. Now, I'm not throwing out a 7 to 5 shot. Mike Battaglia has him at 3 to 1. I think, Randy, you made him 7 to 2. I think that's just about right. I could even see him maybe going up to 4 to 1. But I just think he's a good horse to take a stand against. I don't like the direction his career has gone this year, despite the 2 wins. And, as I said earlier, I'm looking for horses that I think are about to run the best races of their lives in the Kentucky Derby, and I don't think he's one of them.
Interesting. I can't throw him out, but I think I'm going to throw him out. I mean, he's a 2-year-old champ. He's a champ. The way he won last time was a champ. I just haven't seen that sparkle from him that I want to see over the Churchill Downs Strip. Now, I've watched back his works. He's not a flashy workhorse by any means, but I think you just need a little bit extra to win this race. I can't say that he's going to finish last. He's going to be in the hunt, and he'll be on my ticket somewhere. He just might not be on top.
I think he's a horse to take a stand against at 3-1, at 7-2, whatever price he's going to be. If you're betting the race, I think you've got to try to beat Forte. He's the most consistent. He's the most dependable, reliable on paper. The 2-year-old champ, the Breeders' Cup Juvenile champ, Florida Derby winner, yada, yada, yada. But like Bill said, I don't think he's taken a step forward so far, at least in his 3-year-old season, which I think is a mark against him. And even though he did have a bit of a wider trip in the Florida Derby, visually, I thought the Florida Derby was a regression from his race in Fountain of Youth. And I don't like to see horses coming into the Kentucky Derby off of what I consider to be a regressive performance. I've heard people say, including people who I respect, look, this horse just wins. He knows how to win. He saw Mage in front of him. He went to get it. He knows where the finish line is. He's a professional. He's a winner. Okay. The Florida Derby win was a combo platter. Yes, if you look at the fractional breakdown, Forte's last 1/8 of a mile was faster than his previous 1/8 of a mile. I'll give him that. But Mage also fell apart in front of him. So it was a bit of a what do you call it? A misleading barrage. What do you want to call it? It wasn't quite as it didn't have as much to do with his amazing determination as, in my opinion, as some people like to say. An optical illusion. That's what I'm trying to say.
I'm going to have to run. I'm afraid. I'm going to finish my drink because I know you're going to talk an awful lot about Derma Sotogake. But so cheers to Derma Sotogake.
Before we let you go, let's pin you down. Your official 1, 2, 3 picks.
Oh gosh, I like Verifying. I like Angel of Empire. I like Practical Move, and I'm giving you one more. I'm throwing in the horse no one likes. You guys don't like Confidence Game. Purely off the works. As far as the fillies are concerned, it's going to be Wet Paint and South Lawn off that myectomy. I think she's brilliant coming in. I really, really like her. I've got to go and do some birthday celebrations with the Michelle Yu. So I'm going to love you and leave you.
Derma Sotogake.
Oh, cheers.
Take a drink.
Happy Derby. Best of luck with your show, Randy. We'll see you next time.
All right. See you, Zoe.
Thank you.
So Randy and I will carry on. Raise Cane. I don't think we need to spend much time on this horse. He looked terrific winning the Gotham, but it was a pace meltdown that set it up. It was not a very good field. And then he didn't show anything in the Bluegrass. Another horse that, I have no interest in.
Yeah, I thought his race was a little better in the Bluegrass than it looks on paper because he was 5 wide around the second turn. But in this field, he's probably going to be really wide again. And I kind of put him in the same boat as Sun Thunder, maybe a little bit better than Sun Thunder, but I can't use him.
All right, now let's get to the horse that has been such a buzz horse ever since the UAE Derby, Derma Sotogake. And look, I definitely respect everything the Japanese horses have done. I'm not picking him, but I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if he won. I have to see a horse come out of the UAE Derby and do something. And this could be the one before I'm ready to, pick one of these horses. They've been so dismal. And, look, as good as he looked in the UAE Derby, he didn't look as good as Mendelssohn, won by 18.5 lengths, and then finished dead last, 20th in the Kentucky Derby. I'm also interested, Randy, I want to get your opinion on this. I know you like him, but what is his running style going to be? He went to the lead in the UAE Derby and won wire to wire. But if you look back at his prior races in Japan, he was sort of a mid-pack horse. Mm-hmm. Maybe the change of jockeys to Lemaire, maybe he's just a more aggressive rider. I don't know anything about the Japanese jockey that that rode him earlier. But, I will not pick him in my top 3. But if he wins, I'll say tip my hat to the Japanese and say, damn, these guys are good.
Yeah, I mean, we all know, I think most everybody who's watching this podcast knows of how the Japanese have been faring internationally. The Breeders' Cup 2 years ago with one of those horses that looked like they had a Marsh Lorraine that looked like, I mean, where did this horse come from? And yet outruns our horses. Saudi Arabia, Dubai, Hong Kong, they've won the Cox Plate, they've won the Melbourne Cup. I mean, Japanese horses, especially over the last few years, are just dominating worldwide, and even on dirt, whereas maybe it used to be mostly on grass. So the way Mandarin Hero ran in the Santa Anita Derby, a horse who's considered to be, in Japan at least, to be somewhat inferior to Derma Sotogake, just makes me even more confident in the the Japanese horse on Saturday. Now, and he looks good here as well. Now, the running style, it's interesting because from post 17, the way he ran in the UAE Derby, where he had the rail, incidentally, which was one of the reasons I think why Lemaire used him so aggressively early. But since he ran clearly the best race of his life in the UAE Derby on the front end, I'm expecting Lemaire to be fairly aggressive leaving the starting gate. Now, as aggressive as he was last year on Crown Pride, another Japanese horse, OMG, I hope not, because he went 21-3 along with Mikhail Barcelona on Summer is Tomorrow, whatever the horse's name was. They just totally made a mockery out of the early pace of last year's Derby, the 2 foreign jockeys. Now, hopefully he learned a little bit from that, Christophe Lemaire, because he's a fantastic jockey, one of the leading jockeys in Japan. And he doesn't quite blast off quite as aggressively with Derma. He doesn't have to be in front. He can sit second if he has to. He can sit third if he has to. Or he may just be faster than the other horses early. Either way, I think he, to me, in my eyes, I'm trying not to overcomplicate this, Bill. I think he's the fastest horse coming out of the fastest prep. So despite the disadvantages, I'm going to pick him to win. One more thing. The UAE Derby record doesn't really bother me that much. And let me tell you why. Because if you go back and you look at the UAE Derby year by year by year by year, most of the horses had no chance in the Kentucky Derby. I can only pick 3 that did. Street Cry, who got sick, or I think he bruised a foot or something like that. I don't know. But he missed the race. And I want to say it's 2001. Thunder Snow, who turned into a bucking bronc at the beginning of the Kentucky Derby and completely lost all chance. And then there's Mendelssohn, who we gave a 106 Beyer speed figure to. And I think Andy Beyer is undoubtedly going to reference that when we talk to him a little bit later. But Mendelssohn, the way the Derby developed, had no chance. He had no chance. He was knocked around at the start. He was a sloppy track, a wet track. He got all kinds of gunk kicked in his face, which he had never experienced before because he went wire to wire in the UAE Derby. So that's 3 horses that had any kind of a chance in the Kentucky Derby coming out of UAE. And they, for reasons, they weren't part of the finish. So the 0 for 18, I think, should have an asterisk, and I think it'll change after this year.
Well, Zoe had to run, but before she left, her weekly installment, First Things First.
For this week's edition of First Things First, myself and Jeff Siegel hopped on a plane and headed out to Berkeley, California for Gold Rush weekend. Where does the name Gold Rush Weekend come from?
With California being famous for the gold rush back in the days, it's a very historical state as much as anything else, and we wanted to try and celebrate that as well by theming it as such.
And we're off in the California Derby. Sun's getting into it late. Prince Abu Dhabi close to the line. Prince Abu Dhabi and Alex.
Prince Abu Dhabi takes down the California Derby, guys, and you have to be feeling on cloud 9. Let's start with you, Steve.
Oh, this is awesome. Best feeling I've ever had.
Everything was going super expensive out there, and we just picked him. We saw that we liked him. Luckily, he's in our price range, and then we didn't know what we had on our hands until now, I guess. He just keeps improving every time. He gets better and better.
Yesterday's renewal was as good as we've had. which went to Little Red Feather. And down south, we made a valiant attempt to keep it here with Sam Calvario. It was a hell of a finish, and it was a hell of a race. The turf track is in fantastic condition. The jocks all enjoyed it, and we were delighted with the whole day.
Join us this weekend at the Great Race Place. Doors open at 7:15 a.m. Friday and Saturday for wagering on Oaks and Derby. There is a 12:30 post Saturday for a Kentucky Derby watch party in the Chandelier Room. The package does include mint juleps. I like that. Or watch trackside for our Kentucky Derby trackside party. Don't forget your hat. There is a terrific hat contest. For more info, go to santaanita.com.
The TDN Riders Room is brought to you by the KTA KTOB, and what a week it is to be a Kentucky bred here in the Bluegrass State. Leading Derby contenders bred in Kentucky, of course, 17 of the 20 are Kentucky breds, including the favorites Forte, Practical Move, and Tappet Trice. And leading Oaks contenders, also bred in Kentucky, 12 of the 14 entrants, including Wet Paint, Affirmative Lady, and Defining Purpose. Kentucky breds, breed them, raise them, race them. We all win.
With some of the fullest fields in the country and quality racing year-round, there's never been a better time to reap the rewards of breeding and racing in Kentucky. Purse money in Kentucky is at an all-time high, as is average purse per race, outpacing California, Florida, and New York. Kentucky breds. Breed them, raise them, race them. We all win.
The fastest horse of the week is brought to you, as always, by the Fast Stallions of the Windstar Farm. And this week, I think it's happened once before. It's actually the fastest horses of the week. Yes, we have two that tied with the top Beyer speed figure of the week. And even more unusual is that both came from the same card. It was Laurel Park on Saturday on a muddy racetrack. We started off in race 4, where the Pennsylvania bred Nimitz Class scored a very impressive 2 3/4 length victory in the Native Dancer Stakes at 1 1/8 miles. Nimitz Class was the 1-5 favorite, earned a Beyer speed figure of 99. Later in the afternoon, because it was a wet day, the King Leatherberry Stakes was taken off of the turf, and the winner of that 5.5 furlong sprint in the muddy dirt was Stage Left, who scores by 2 1/4 lengths. He was the 2-1 second favorite in the King Leatherberry, and Stage Left also earned a Beyer speed figure of 99. So Nimitz Class and Stage Left, the fastest horses of the week. Now, for that fast sire at Windstar, they don't come much faster than Into Mischief's fastest son, Life is Good. He was, of course, a 3-time Grade 1 winner last year, effortless winner of the Woodward, uncontested winner of the Whitney, dominant winner of the Pegasus World Cup over the previous year's Horse of the Year, Knicks Go. Also, he won the $1 million Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile by 5 3/4 lengths, which was the largest margin of victory at the 21 Breeders' Cup. And with a 112 Beyer speed figure, he still rates as Into Mischief's fastest son on the numbers, earning 9 triple-digit Beyers. TDN Rising Star in his career debut, Life is Good, stands at Windstar for a fee of $100,000. The Green Group has over 500 clients in the horse business, and there is a reason for this. They are an accounting and tax consulting advisory firm that specializes in the thoroughbred industry with proven strategies to save you money on taxes. You can learn more at www.greenco.com.
Now we welcome in the Green Group guest of the week, none other than the speed figure guru, the most respected handicapper perhaps in all of horse racing, Mr. Andy Beyer, with the Daily Racing Form, now with his speed figures and longtime racing columnist for the Washington Post. Andy, thanks for joining us. I want to touch first on Forte with you.
Before we touch any further, let's pronounce his name correctly. It's Fort.
It's Fort?
It is Fort, is the way intelligent people pronounce it.
Now, wait a minute. I am going to now ask Randy Moss that question, because nobody works harder on getting these names right. Is Andy right?
Well, look, Andy has forgotten more about the correct use of the English language than I know. And Andy has been beating this drum forever that the correct pronunciation is Fort.
It derives from French. It's not, our usage of it has nothing to do with Italian music, which the word forte comes from. So you may call him what you want. He'll always be Fort to me.
But much as the actual correct pronunciation of Tapit Trice should be Tapit Trice, the owner of Tapit Trice and the owner of Forte say they want their horses' names pronounced Forte and Tapit Trice. So correct grammar, be what it is.
Andy, the number 15 horse in the Kentucky Derby, that horse, on the Beyer figures, he's not really faster than anybody else. One pattern that I don't like about him is he actually ran a faster race at 2 in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile than he's running at 3. Do you see him as a vulnerable favorite?
Very much. I don't like him. I don't like him because the name issue grates on me every time I hear it. But he is not, historically what we look for in the Kentucky Derbies is a horse on the upgrade coming into the Derby. He clearly doesn't fit that profile. And, plus, yes, he's trained by Todd Pletcher, but as we know, Todd's Fort is not training horses to win the Derby. His record in this race is 2 for 62. So I don't think you get any extra credit for being in the Pletcher barn in this race. I want no part of Fort. I don't think he'll hit the board.
Okay, so you've got a very strong opinion about Fort. The second favorite also comes from the Todd Pletcher barn, Tapit Trice. What are your feelings about that one?
I think he is okay, and certainly I think better than the favorite. I mean, I thought his race in the Bluegrass, was pretty good. This is a horse who doesn't have speed, and he was in a kind of a relatively paceless race last time, and had to hit the gas early, and still was able to win and to outgame a good horse in Verifying. So I thought that was a positive effort.
Okay, well, nice to finally meet the great Andy Beyer. Fabulous to see you. I have a question on Confidence Game because he's jumped onto everybody's radar off a stellar work. He's been off for 10 weeks. He had a 94 Beyer in the Rebel. If he can make the same kind of jump, surely he's in the hunt because Bill wasn't on Tapit Trice at all about the same time that we all weren't on him when he won the Rebel Stakes. So do you think there's a chance he can make the same kind of jump forward and be in the hunt?
I can't predict that. I mean, but you could say of almost any horse in this race, gee, if he can jump up 6 or 8 points, he could win the Derby. And I didn't think the Oaklawn 3-year-old population was that good this winter. So he has not really been on my radar screen, although it might have been an oversight. So.
Who do you like?
I am looking for a history-making Japanese victory on Saturday. To me, the even though this isn't a great Derby field, it's not a great Derby. What makes it really interesting to me is the Japanese presence. And I've been looking a lot at this, and I think that Japan is really on the brink of becoming the number one power in world horse racing, eclipsing even Great Britain and the United States. It's going to happen at the present rate eventually, and the coming out party just might be Saturday.
Andy, on Derma Sotogake, the one thing that most people are using as a knock against him is the absolutely dismal record of horses coming out of the UAE Derby into the Kentucky Derby. Do you think that's a factor? Does that worry you?
No, I mean, if you want to look at history, I mean, the Japanese always used to finish last in any race they ran in the United States. That was an annual theme of the old Washington D.C. International. They are. Their racing is just improving very dramatically. They're winning major races around the world, so I don't think the history of the Dubai race is relevant.
So obviously, handicapping has to evolve with the times. We're talking about a Japanese horse right now in the Kentucky Derby. I first met you. My first Kentucky Derby in 1980 in the Churchill Downs press box. You've handicapped every Kentucky Derby since then and before then. How has your handicapping the Derby specifically changed over the last 40 years or so?
Well, it probably hasn't changed enough, because I have always been, I mean, through much of the Derby's history, I've been a believer in the history that says you've got to have the necessary foundation of fitness to win the Derby. I mean, I believe in the curse of Apollo. You can't win the Derby without experience it too. And all of those old yardsticks have really been kind of eclipsed. I mean, I throw out horses like Justify, in a flash because they haven't done enough, and so that's been very difficult for me to reconcile. That you just don't need that kind of experience to win. One consequence of that is that nobody's running that well in the Derby. I mean, this Derby could be won with a speed figure of 99, which wouldn't be competitive in most Derbies historically. But these horses are not seasoned enough. So that's my view of the history of handicapping the Derby. I did pick a winner in this millennium, though, so I'm not totally.
So, Andy, which of the horses have you been most disappointed in, for one, after allotting a good Beyer speed figure and hoping they're going to jump forward, and most encouraged by moving forwards?
Well, you mean in this year's year's crop? Randy is probably as well equipped to talk about this as I. But let's leaving aside Beyer speed figures, from the time standpoint, the most interesting horse is Derma Sotogake. His performance in Dubai. If you just look at the final time compared to the last 15 UAE Derbies, he's so much faster than anybody else, and it wasn't just if you compare other races run on that day, it was still a terrific effort. So he is the horse. I'm not sure how much he has stepped up, because I certainly don't have any any figures from Japan, but he's the horse from the figure standpoint, or the time standpoint, that really interests me.
I'll throw this question, Randy. You can answer this as well. But getting back to Derma Sotogake, was there a temptation to try to make a figure on him? Do you have a ballpark guess off that performance? Go.
Let me answer that.
Yeah,
4 years ago, we did. In 2018, we did that when Mendelssohn had won the UAE Derby, and we made a figure to the best of our ability, and we were confident. I was confident enough in it that we published it, and after Mendelssohn lost by 70 lengths, I felt maybe we stuck our neck out improperly here. So we will just talk in terms of the Japanese horse. We're running fast. We're not going to really give them a specific number. Although I think I heard you, Randy, mentioning a number or two that you thought.
Very, very, very unofficially ballpark. What we know is that you can compare the UAE Derby time to the Dubai World Cup time on the same card, right? One's a mile and 3/16, one's a mile and a quarter. Neither have a run-up, as they don't in other countries, so there's no run-up issues involved with the final time. And historically, over the last 15 or 20 years, the Dubai World Cup has been 15 to 20 Beyer points faster than the UAE Derby, right? This year, the UAE Derby was 5 Beyer points faster than the Dubai World Cup. Now, it's not a especially strong Dubai World Cup field, I don't think, in terms of the numbers. But I think it's probably pretty safe to say that whatever estimate you put out there, if we were doing Beyer speed figures for Dubai, Derma Sotogake would have solidly the fastest figure of any of the American Derby prep horses. Correct, Andy? You agree with that?
Yes.
Okay.
But I was swayed very as much, just by the whole Japanese scenario as by the time issue. In fact, I was going to pick Continuar as my 50-1 bomber, just because he was trained by the top Japanese trainer, and it was really going to be under the radar. But he evidently has not trained that well since he's been at Churchill. But nevertheless, that to me is the theme of the race.
All right. Well, I was going to play the Dharma Sotogake drinking game with Randy later, wondering how many times he's mentioned. You've already started me off. I didn't realize that Randy was on Dharma Sotogake. So cheers to that. I want to ask you about the fillies and the Oaks. Who are you looking forward to in the Kentucky Oaks? Because
I was so depressed looking at the figures in the Oaks that I just haven't even focused on it yet.
Really?
I mean, the idea that nobody in that field has run a figure over 90 is just embarrassing. I mean, this is like I've never seen a race this famous look so bad from the speed figure standpoint.
Andy, I very much want to hear your opinion on the computer players and how much it has changed the game that we're all playing, and how much of I think a big disadvantage the normal players are at. I don't know if you agree, but this is something in that we've seen come around only in the last 10 years or so, and it's absolutely turned the world of wagering on horses upside down, and I think very much for the worse for the sport.
It's a huge disadvantage, but from my perspective, the worst aspect of it was that racetracks, to cater to the syndicates, basically killed the traditional exotic wagers, particularly the pick six, and substituted the Rainbow Six, or whatever a track wanted to call it, which was and created a set of rules that basically the average player could never win. I was on a seminar at Gulfstream some years ago, and Ron Nicoletta, as we came to the Rainbow Six, said, "Well, Andy, tell us about your strategy for playing the Rainbow Six." And I told the audience, I said, "I have a piece of advice: never, ever consider playing this bet. It is the worst sucker bet ever devised. You cannot win." I think that was my last appearance on the Gulfstream. But the fact is that with the small betting unit, the syndicates can cover so many more combinations that any normal player could, that the average player is never going to get into the cracks, but or just get into a little opening that the computer guys have left out. You can't have the lone ticket, and that's the only occasion where it makes sense over time to play that bet if you're going for the big jackpot. So I hate it. The other things they do, well, they're just they're incredibly smart. I think the idea that the race tracks kind of own part of their business is an incredible conflict of interest, that works against the fans as well. But, I could put up with a lot of things, but, the destruction of the traditional pick six has really spoiled the game for me.
Well, let me follow up with that. Is there right now, people believe that the computer guys account for about 33% of the handle, to be $4 billion in 2022. There doesn't seem to be any easy answer. I'd love to see these guys, kicked out, or put something in place where they have to bet 5 minutes to post, which would take away their advantages or whatnot. But then the handle would be decimated. And I think it also, you can look at the numbers and say this is showing that they've driven a lot of people out of the game because all their betting is not accounting for a larger overall handle. Is there a solution to this? How should racing tackle this problem?
I don't know. I mean, and we it's hard to tell whether the decline in play by the great mass of horse players is just due to the competition from the syndicates, or it's just because of a lot of inherent issues in the game. It's probably a mixture of both. But the computer guys have figured out a way to play the game that is incredibly smart. I on trips overseas, I met a couple big players using this methodology in other countries, and it was stunning what they're doing. But they obviously have a lot of advantages that aren't open to anybody else, and that. That should make the industry feel a little uneasy.
Well, great insights from Andy Beyer, who doesn't like Fort in the Kentucky Derby, and he's very insistent that it is Fort, not Forte. So, Andy, thanks for the lesson on the proper pronunciation, and thanks as always for your insights. You never disappoint. You're not only a great handicapper, you're very entertaining. We thank you for being our guest this week on the TDN Writers Room Podcast.
As this week's guest of the week, Andy Beyer will receive a free 1-hour tax consultation from the Green Group. You can learn more about the Green Group and what they can do for your taxes at www.greenco.com.
Are you paying too much in taxes? The Green Group can help. There's a reason the most successful owners, breeders, and horsemen select the Green Group as their tax advisors. They save you money and share successful strategies. Over the past 40 years, the Green Group founder, Len Green, has owned and bred some of the best racehorses in the history of the sport, like Eclipse Award-winning champions Jaywalk and Wonder Wheel. His DJ stable competes at the highest level and has received the game's most prestigious honors. Len Green's in-depth, hands-on industry knowledge, combined with cutting-edge tax-saving strategies, has produced positive results for his clientele and has made the Green Group the top-rated accounting and tax firm in the thoroughbred business. For a confidential and complimentary consultation, contact us at 732-634-5100 or visit our website at www.greenco.com. The Green Group, proven strategies to save you taxes.
The PA Horse Breeders Association presents the Pennsylvania Stallion Series. 6 races for PA sired, PA bred 2-year-olds at parks. 2 $100,000 contests at 5.5 furlongs. On August 21st, PA Day at the races. September 23rd, PA Derby Day has 2 races at 6.5 furlongs, both with a $150,000 purse. And in December, 2 races going long, each worth $200,000. For more, go to PABred.com.
The TDN Writers Room is also brought to you by the Pennsylvania Horse Breeders Association. The 2022 Iroquois Award champion finalists are out, and leading the way in nominations, Caravel, who's up for champion older female, female sprinter, turf sprinter, and horse of the year. Who will take home the prizes? May 12th at the Inn at Mendenhall in Chadds Ford, Pennsylvania. You can check out the complete list at PABred.com. And we have one good idea of what Pennsylvania bred colt will be on the list next year. Of course, it's Angel of Empire, one of the top choices for the Kentucky Derby for Brad Cox. The PA bred and raised by Forgotten Land Investment and Black Diamond Equine.
Well, it's finished off the last 3 horses, excluding the also eligibles in the Kentucky Derby. And these will be 3 of the longest prices on the board. Number 18 is Rocket Can. Obviously, a lot of respect for Bill Mott. But, this is a horse that I thought ran really well to win the Holy Bull, had a wide trip, ran pretty well in the Fountain of Youth, even though he was beaten by Forte. But he was the favorite in the Arkansas Derby, and he just didn't really have it. Ran kind of evenly. Blinkers are on for him. Maybe that'll help him a little bit, but not a horse that I'm...
No, in the Holy Bull, he ran an 82 Beyer speed figure, right? He was wide on both turns. You can give him extra credit if you want, like I like to do in my handicapping when that happens, and bump him up to maybe an 88 or an 89. Then he came back and ran second to Forte in the Fountain of Youth. Got a 91, a little bit of a wide trip again last time in the Arkansas Derby, got an 86. Those aren't good enough. It's just not good enough. Those aren't to even factor in the Kentucky Derby. Mott is putting the blinkers on in an attempt to, maybe get a little bit of improvement out of him on Saturday, but he's a horse I think is up against it.
Number 19 is Lord Miles. I mean, he really improved in the Wood Memorial, running a 93 Beyer after running a 79 in the Tampa Bay Derby. I don't see how anybody came up with him that day at 59-1. We sound like a broken record, but the Wood Memorial is a race that is not producing anything when it comes to Kentucky Derby. And this was most people believe, myself included, this was a particularly weak running of it. When you have a 59-1 shot winning, that pretty much tells you something. Saffie Joseph, boy, he knows how to get to the winner's circle, but this would be nearly a miracle if he were.
Yeah, I mean, look, he beat Hit Show by a nose. The way the race was run, the ground that Hit Show lost on the first turn, significantly more than the ground Lord Miles lost. So you can definitely, I think, assume that Hit Show was probably the better horse of the 2 in that race. And it wasn't a strong race to begin with. So, no, I don't like Lord Miles either.
Cantionnaire is the number 20 horse, and it rounds out the main body of the race. It's funny, everybody loves, not everybody, but so many people are just so high on Derma Sotogake. This is the other Japanese horse that nobody seems to like, but I can understand why. First of all, he got beat 10 lengths by Derma Sotogake in the UAE Derby. He did, back in November, lose to him only by a nose in a race in Japan. I guess it's the November 26th race, the Catalea Stakes, that he won that gave him the automatic entry into the Derby. I have to question that. Why is that a race that gets you into the Kentucky Derby? I think you could find a better race in Japan. But 5th beaten 3 in the Saudi Derby, 3rd beaten 10 in the UAE Derby. People say he's not training well. Now, the one thing he does have going for him is the trainer, Yoshida Yahagi. And he is merely 2 for 2 in his career in the U.S. And they're both Breeders' Cup wins. He is the man behind the wins by Love's Only You and March Lorraine in the 2021 Breeders' Cup. Pulled off what was a minor miracle there. So I think you have to respect the trainer, but the trainer has to have the horse as well.
No, look, everything you say about Derma Sotogake and how Japanese horses have been dominating around the world, but also apply to Continuar. You see so many of these races, in Dubai, for example, where the Japanese horses run 1, 2, 3, 4, like they did in the UAE Derby this past year. But Continuar worked in company with Derma Sotogake, worked before last. And Derma Sotogake just absolutely left him for dead. Continuar did not look good at all. As a matter of fact, he looked like a horse who would be more likely to finish last than finish first. He looked that bad in the workout. But like you point out, I mean, this trainer clearly knows what he's doing. I know someone who regularly bets Japanese races in the early morning hours, a real degenerate, who says that this guy is like an absolute magician with horses. So there is that. But he's going to have to be a magician, I think, to get Continuar, especially from post 20, into the winner's circle, given the way he worked the other day.
All right, Randy, Zoe gave us her top three. My official top three picks will be Teppet Trice, Angel of Empire, and Skinner. Give me your 1, 2, 3.
My top three would be Derma Sotogake, Verifying, and Teppet Trice.
All right. Some parallels there between my picks as well. All right, so let's go quick look at the Kentucky Oaks on Friday. And I totally agree with Andy Beyer. This is like the slowest bunch of good 3-year-olds or grade 1 level Kentucky Oaks 3-year-olds that you can't even almost imagine they're as slow as they are. The top number in the race is Botanical's 91. That was on a synthetic surface. The top dirt number is Wet Paint's 89. So, and this is a division that just kept shooting itself in the foot all throughout the preps. I mean, Wonder Wheel was the 2-year-old champion. She hasn't been any good this year. Hoosier Philly was a horse that got tons of hype. She doesn't even make it into the race. Remember Justique, when we were all thinking about how good she might be? Matter of fact, I think those are my top 3 in order in my first Kentucky Oaks top 10 for the Thoroughbred Daily News. And look where they are now. Only Wonder Wheel even made the race. And she's coming in off a real dull effort in the Ashland. I'll pick Botanical. I'm not real worried about, she's never run on the dirt, but she's been really good on the synthetic at Turfway Park. Again, not running against probably the very best of the division, but visually she's been very impressive. I said earlier, she's got that top Beyer number. I think she's going to get to the lead in here, and she'll get pressed by Flying Connection. But I think she might get a good trip. And for what it's worth, again, I gave you those figures from the Thorograph sheets on the synthetic sires. Medaglia d'Oro is her sire. Medaglia d'Oro has won 14% on the synthetic surface and 18% on the dirt. So be that as it may, or take it for what it's worth, you would think that she's going to be just fine on the dirt. So she's my pick in there, but this isn't a race where I don't know, Randy, maybe you disagree. I just don't really like anybody, to be honest.
Look, I struggle with this race as well, and I really struggle with Botanical because I came in here prepared to really like her in the Kentucky Oaks because I did think she was so visually impressive. I wanted to see, not that I put that much stock in workouts, but I wanted to see her train on the dirt at Churchill Downs to see how she looked. And also ask people who I think are better at this than me what they thought about her workouts on dirt here at Churchill Downs. And she had a workout in company with her stablemate Flashy Jim, who she defeated in the Bourbonette. Flashy Jim was on the inside, Botanical was on the outside, which is a key right there to tell you which one Cox liked better. He liked Botanical better of the two in that workout. And 2 people that I talked to, or one that I read, Mike Welch, who I respect tremendously, really thought the workout was good. And 2 people whose opinions I really respect said they thought that she looked terrible, that she didn't look like she was striding out at all over the dirt. So I don't know what to think. I guess I came here prepared to pick her, but now I guess I'm just going to go more conventional. Wet Paint has been an overachiever all year long for Brad Cox. I mean, she came in to the Cox barn at Oaklawn Park off of back-to-back Beyer speed figures at Indiana and Turfway of 67 and 69. She wasn't even on the radar in the Cox barn as being one of their best 3-year-old fillies. And then lo and behold, she goes 3 for 3. Flavien Prat loves her. fast track. She can run on a wet track, and it might rain on Friday. That's in the forecast right now at Churchill Downs. So I think wet paint, she's going to get some pace to run at between Botanical and Flying Connection. So I think wet paint, it's very, I'm not giving you anything that's going to pay much, but I like the wet paint South Lawn Exacta.
The TDN Writers Room is brought to you by XBTV. The XBTV workout of the week is Confidence Game, who breezed 5 furlongs in 59 on Saturday at Churchill Downs for trainer Keith Bizarmo. It looked as good as a horse can look. The work was the fastest of 54 5-furlong works at Churchill on the day. Bizarmo joked back to the barn that he'd have to fire jockey James Graham for going so fast. We'll be right back after this message from XBTV.
All the thrills. Fraction of the bills. Experience the power of the partnership. Change your life, make new friends, and compete at the highest level of thoroughbred racing. West Point Thoroughbreds, the gold standard in racing partnerships. Visit westpointtb.com.
The TDN Writers Room is brought to you by West Point Thoroughbreds. Joining a West Point Thoroughbreds partnership can vault you into the world of instant camaraderie among people surrounding high-class horses and stakes action for a fraction of the cost of trying to do it on your own. West Point partners are back at the Kentucky Derby for the 7th time this year with Jace's Road, looks to join 2017 hero Always Dreaming, bringing home the roses for the partnership. Florent Giroux is aboard for Jace's Road, winning the Gunrunner Stakes at the Fairgrounds, gets the mount again on May 6th. Jace's Road is trained by Brad Cox and owned in partnership with the Albaugh Family Stables. You can learn more about West Point Thoroughbreds by going to westpointtb.com. Well, this week's Remy cartoon is in. It'll appear in Friday's edition of the Thoroughbred Daily News, as it does each week. And just think, if you're a closer in the Derby, how many goggles does a jockey need? And when is enough enough? He kind of tackles that subject. So another cute cartoon from Remy Block. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us. This has been a very special edition of the TDN Writers Room. Hopefully Randy, Zoe, and myself gave you some insights into the Kentucky Derby to help you pick a winner on Saturday and cash some tickets. So I want to thank Randy Moss and Zoe Cadman. I also want to thank our Green Group guest of the week, Mr. Andy Beyer, our associate producer, Katie Petroniak, our editors, Anthony LaRocca, Leah LaRocca, and Nathan Wilkinson. Enjoy the Derby, everybody. We'll see you next week.